Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast, the podcast about Gacha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey everyone.
And this week, we're going to do a sort of year in review of, how this year of Gacha gaming has gone for Dave and I, and sort of our experiences over it, what we've learned, what we've lost, so on and so forth. So why don't we jump right in? Dave, just sort of in general, I guess, how would you categorize this year for you as far as Gacha gaming goes?
So for me this year, there were, as always, a lot of games that came out. Some of which, met expectations. Some exceeded expectations, and others, of course, fell short of our expectations. And then also, of course, we have to consider our games that weren't necessarily released this year, but we continue to see, more and more content get pushed out and brought to us, and then those that are continuing to remain strong. And then, of course, we also, I think, have a few goodbyes, special goodbyes we want to say for games that are leaving us in 2024 or have left us earlier this year. Um, but I would say, I guess, for me to kind of start with some games. I don't know how you want to start here. If we want to start with games that came out here in 2024 that are on our mind for one reason, whether it be positive or another, maybe not so positive.
Well,
What about you, Steve? What are your thoughts?
I mean, to be honest, I think that this has been a very solid year for me as far as Gacha gaming goes, as far as, just gaming in general goes. Um, can't really complain. There's been some quality releases, as you've mentioned. We've lost some people along the way, lost some games along the way. But I'm really pleased with sort of the state of this last year. And yeah, I'm good to jump in with
Okay.
whatever. Maybe
Well,
start.
I,
Oh, you
I was
you've
gonna
got
say
a plan.
I got five games
Okay.
that I have here in my notes that I wanted to talk about for various reasons. Some of which I've spent more time with than others, maybe, but I want to at least get your feedback on them.
Okay.
So the first game I want to start out with that released in 2024 was Solo Leveling Arise, and so I don't remember, Steve. Did you try this one out, or was this one that you skipped over? Because I think you liked the IP, but I can't remember if you tried the game.
So yeah, I skipped over it. I was aware of the IP. I've read through the long form comic, the web comic that came out along with it, or that had come out previously. I hadn't watched the anime. Um, but I'm aware of it. I mainly skipped it because while I understood how they would end up doing the Gotcha game, it just didn't really interest me. Where my understanding would be, it would basically you'd be playing as whoever the main, I forget who the main character of Solo Leveling was, but you'd basically be that guy, and then just summon shadow copies of stuff, and that would be the Gotcha characters, and that didn't really interest me. I might be wrong about how that game played, but just from the outside looking in, that was sort of, I saw the game going and went, I'm hard pass.
Yeah, so for Solo Leveling Arise, for me, it was an IP. Actually, I wasn't familiar with it. And in an attempt to try out, it didn't last very long for me. It basically, I think, was just day one. Because I remember the launch being rough in terms of load screen times and server connectivity issues. Now, I think they've ultimately eventually worked that out, of course, but it seemed more egregious than I think other games that I've seen on launch,
Mm-hmm.
and I just kind of never went back to it, unfortunately. So as far as like what launches go, that one was a little bit disappointing for me on that front.
Okay.
Um, but the next few games, I think we'll be able to dive into a little bit deeper because I know obviously we played them because we did some let's plays
Yeah.
for these launches, and so the first one I do want to talk about is Wuthering Waves. So I kind of want to dive into this game, this take on I on Punishing Gray Raven Studio, right? Their spin on essentially the Genshin open world exploration. And for this one, I always like character art was great. The open world exploration, can be fun. Um, but for this one on launch for me, I think we had fun on launch night,
Mhm.
playing it for a few hours there, and there were a lot of good things about it. And I think it's still doing pretty well. I see that they're putting out new content, pretty consistently, and people seem to be happy with it. But for me, it literally came down to I only have so much time in the day, and because it's not, I would say, groundbreaking or doing anything revolutionary or new in terms of the genre, I have a sunk cost fallacy with Genshin a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I'm vested in Genshin's characters, I'm vested in Genshin's story, and the characters to me in Wuthering Waves didn't pop personality wise like maybe they do in Genshin. And so it wasn't enough for me to stick around or make it my daily grind, as it were. But what about you, Steve? What were maybe some of your takeaways, highlights from Wuthering Waves, and what your ultimate review of that one would have been?
Um, I have mixed feelings about Wuthering Waves because I don't think it was a bad game. I think I'm happy it's
Mhm.
doing well, but I kind of resent it because it made me into a bit of a hypocrite, and I'll get into that when we get to ZZZ. But yeah, I think the part of the reason I bounced off of it was I really just didn't have the energy to go through the leveling and grind of getting the characters up to max level and playable um, that the game required. That the combination of the exploration, having to find domains, having to or whatever they called their version of domains, fighting bosses, gathering materials, so on and so forth. It was just too much of a time sink for something that you just kind of wanted to rush to end game. Um, I would also say that it ran to the same problem I honestly have with Genshin, and as you mentioned, Genshin has a lot of sunk cost fallacy, tied to it for us, where Wuthering Waves just didn't have it, and I didn't have the energy to spend 20 minutes doing dailies in it when I could pop over into most other gotchas and get those done 10, 15. At the high end. It would take half as long to do it. I could sweep or, set it to auto battle or whatever while I'm, supposed to be doing other things and, you know, get dailies done. Whereas Withering Waves forces you to sit down and engage with it and play with it, which isn't a bad thing. It's just not necessarily what I'm looking for in a gotcha. Um, but again, I think it's a very, very good game that unfortunately is not what I'm looking for. Uh, but I didn't.
Like that niche is kind of already filled, or in terms of my games library.
Yeah, and I would also argue that while it has good action, it the action RPG side of it is solid. It's not the way I prefer my action RPGs. I prefer a much slower Dark Souls RPG than I necessarily prefer Devil May Cry. Uh, to use comparisons there.
Okay, yeah, those are good analogy. And I would say as far as the combat, yeah, I did like the concept of perfect counters and perfect dodges and evades, things like that. Um, I was thinking back to doing the fights or the overworld fights for Ascension materials, or and I was reminded of a time I was trying to do this, and they don't isolate the boss fights enough. And what I mean by that is the fight got so chaotic, I was on the border edge, like where the boss was,
Mhm.
and then random mobs get pulled into that fight, making it an already, boss,
Mhm.
bullet sponge type, because you're a little underleveled when you're trying to level things up, right? Making that fight just all the more tedious, and just more time consuming, because now you're having, instead of one bullet sponge, you have four bullet sponges and all different mechanics going on now instead of just kind of the main boss.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do think that the open world bosses also annoyed me because there were a number of times where if you kited the boss for too long, it would just reset. So if you were playing a character that's like, I avoided. I think it's the gun girl who had like it was one of the starter characters that had like twin pistols or something, and I ended up kiting the boss successfully for at least a solid minute or two, and finally the boss just went, well, I'm not doing any damage, I'm just gonna reset my health bar and go home. It's like that's not fair. I was beating the boss. Like, I know I
so
wasn't.
deflating.
Yeah, it's You gave me a character that's explicitly designed to do that, and then when I do that, the game goes, well, we're gonna just take our ball and go home. You have to get hit by me. It's like that's kind of crap, but whatever.
Uh, but yeah, so that was Wuthering Waves, and the story was you know decent. Again,
It gave us
it's
a
getting
skip option, so
we can appreciate the skip button. So we ever were to come back to it, that's gonna be there. Um, Now I do kind of want to move over to, yeah, you mentioned it. Zenless Zone Zero launched this year as well, and I want you to go ahead and start here because you'd mentioned you're gonna come out as being a little bit of a hypocrite about a topic. So let's hear it.
So when Wuthering Waves came out, one of the things I said is that I felt like the exploration side of it was excessive and didn't really work, and that what I really wanted was just the fights in like empty rooms. Basically, you would just, play through a mini dungeon in little rooms and it would focus more on the fights. And that would be what I wanted out of the game. And then ZZZ gives me exactly what I said I wanted. And I bounced off of ZZZ too. So yeah, I feel a little bit like a hypocrite, but for criticizing Wuthering Waves, and then I get exactly what I want, and I go, I didn't actually want this either. I think I don't want gotcha games that require too much in regards to dailies. I want to be able to auto battle. I want to be able to just get it done quick. Um, and yeah, so I that's what I meant when I said that. Made me into a bit of a hypocrite was basically made me eat my own words, but the combination of the two. But what were your thoughts on ZZZ?
So Zenless Zone Zero for me, I loved the style and the flair of Zenless Zone Zero. The game popped in terms of colors, art style, characters, all very unique. Which when you have, a game like Genshin, and then your same studio is doing, this a similar project to give it its own unique flair. Like they pop in a different way than Genshin characters or Star Rail characters do. So kudos to them for doing that. The gameplay itself, I mean, I enjoyed again the idea of swapping characters and comboing up and doing perfect blocks and evades, things of that nature. I didn't love the smaller roster in terms of you only bring 3 characters into a combat. I'm a big fan of let me have more characters in my party, whether it be a turn-based RPG or it be an action RPG like Genshin or something to that effect. More characters. I like the ability to use more characters. So 3 was kind of limiting, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to count the Bang Boos as a 4th character. I'm not sorry. No offense to Bang Boos. For Zenless Zone Zero, it is a game that I actually ultimately on it. I have uninstalled it. I went at it at, again, I only have so many hours in the day, and I was debating between what games am I going to eliminate from my rotation, and on this last banner that we had, and I forget her name, but it was the flamethrower
Bernice
girl. She looked awesome. I did her trial. She looked like a lot of fun. I was on the guarantee because I lost the 50-50 on the last banner I'd pulled for, so I was guaranteed, but I didn't have enough currency to get to the soft pity. I had like enough to get maybe 20 short of the soft pity. I had like 40 or 50 pulls, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna spend all 50 pulls, and if I pull her, I'll keep the game and I'll keep dabbling with it. But if I don't get her, then it's just a sign this is time to back out of this one. Ultimately, did not get her. Didn't get anything. So uninstalled the game. But again, it doesn't take away from the funness of the game or how good it was. Again, for me, it's so similar to Genshin in terms of action RPG or even Honkai Impact the Third when I used to play that. But that itch is already being scratched by another game, and again, I'm highly invested in the story and the characters of Genshin. So if I'm having to pick a game that I'm going to play through to conclusion, it's going to be Genshin. Now, this doesn't mean I almost said that as a double negative, but I don't not come back. This isn't to say I'll never come back to Zenless Zone Zero. and then just have a bunch of content to play through and play the story and stuff. Like that may very realistically happen in 2025 for me. But as of right now, it isn't on the computer as I dabble in other games, especially around the holidays. Right now is the other thing too. With the holidays coming up, I'm going to be trying out all these new games that are launching, and then there's the holidays with family and such. So how much time am I really having to dedicate? It's like I'll I won't have FOMO. I won't get invested in ZZZ. Wait till after the holidays and reassess my timetable.
Fair enough. I know for me that, again, a lot of what you said is very similar to sort of my feelings. I think one other kind of note that I would make is that the story in Zenless Zone Zero just didn't hook me the same way that like Star Rail did, Genshin did. It is a much more kind of chill, down to earth. It sounds weird to say down to earth in a story in which you help people steal stuff and engage in corporate espionage, but the tone and the setting and so forth is much more laid back. It feels I don't know, it didn't quite hook me the same way that I was hooked with Star Rail and Genshin. So just ended up kind of going like, I'm not really motivated to jump back in and see what's going on with the events of the story. The different groups and factions are kind of interesting, but there wasn't anything that just made me go, yeah, I love this. I got to get more of that story. So I think
Yeah,
that kind of was another thing. Like the animation is beautiful. The game looks amazing. It's got a tone and a setup that I am in love with. It's when we were playing it, my first thought was this is Persona as all hell. This is
yes.
this is Persona the Gacha, except for the actual Persona gachas. It just didn't it didn't have the same story hooks that I feel like Persona. So
Yeah, and I guess to clarify, like compare this versus Wuthering Waves,
mhm.
I may come back to ZZZ in 2025. I may reinstall it. It's not a problem. Wuthering Waves, that is a game that's uninstalled and done in my books. I don't have any um interest. I don't have any interest in going back to try out that game. Um, so I guess to ZZZ's credit, despite being in the same vein in terms of gameplay, as Genshin and some other action RPGs, I would go back to that, but Wuthering Waves, not so much.
Yeah, I think I'm in the similar boat in that regard as well.
Now, shifting to the fourth game I wanted to talk about that came out this year, that we both tried, I think, at various stages. I think I tried it at initial launch,
Mhm.
and then when it came out here recently on Steam, I gave it another go. That would be Reverse 1999. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this game because this was a game that had a lot of hype pre-launch. It oozed with its own brand and style and
Mhm.
theme. Um, and I was definitely interested to try it out. But ultimately, I think it's a game that I have mixed feelings about the card style battling system in terms of picking cards and
Mhm.
then them merging, et cetera, et cetera. But what were your thoughts on this one, and when in its game life cycle did you try it out?
Um, I think I tried it out when that would have been back in I think March or May. So I don't think it was after its initial release, but it was before it came out on Steam. So
Mhm.
it came out. I played it during that awkward window. I agree that the game just oozes its own style. It has its own. I think when I first talked about it on the podcast, it was sort of a semi-noir 1950s, 1960s sort of Europe feel to it. London, Europe, what have you, feel. And I think I will agree that the combat of the game just was a little bit awkward. Um, the way that you use the cards, the way that you engage with it. I basically ended up turning on auto battle and just kind of letting it go. As soon as I got it, I got auto battle as an option. I think the other thing that kind of turned me off to it was some of the characters that you get for some of them were just kind of unappealing. The apple, I think, which is one of your main characters, um, just was kind of meh. And then
That one cracked me up.
yeah,
When I saw an apple as a character, I cracked.
I mean, it's a funny joke, but when you're like pulling for characters and you get, I think it was Mr. Apple or Mr. Seed or something like that. When you get that character like multiple times, I'm kind of left going, like, really, guys? Like, okay, haha, but I kind of wanted real characters. Um, and it just didn't really pull any characters that I fell in love with. So I ended up just kind of skipping over it, basically, or moving on from the game. But what about you?
Yeah, so for me, it's still in my Steam library. It's currently uninstalled from my computer, but it's still in there. Um, to maybe go back, if they do another big event or anniversary free giveaway type stuff, to kind of maybe scratch the polls, because I did like the character designs. Again, because because it had its own style. It wasn't, really too similar to other Gacha styles. It's not like, they had a good mix of character. They didn't just lean into maybe one direction or another. It's not like it's specifically all mecha, or it's all specifically high fantasy, or it's all husbandos, or it's all waifus. It was a good mix of husbandos and waifus. It's a, decent mix of, different jobs, as it were, different types of characters. Uh, so yeah, definitely had it was its own style. But again, I have mixed emotions about the card play style, because in some games I don't mind it, but in that particular game, yeah, it's just, I don't know, I wasn't a fan. And the graphics during combat, the characters during combat,
Mhm.
that style of character,
It
I
was
wouldn't
a
describe it
cibi
as,
chibi kind of
yeah, I
style.
wouldn't
Yeah.
describe it as like a full-on chibi style animation. But it was more akin to that than like true sprites. And so it's just because it didn't feel like it was committing one way or the other. It just didn't hit right for me.
Mhm.
Now the characters in their profile screens themselves look really, really nice, and the apple is very is very dapper, very, very
Yeah.
posh. Um, but um overall, like I said, I think it's doing all right. When I was last looking at the sensor tower numbers, nothing too out there crazy, but it's still making money. So it'll probably still be around for a while. Now, another game I wanted to talk about was Echopolis, or Echopolis, how it was pronounced.
Yeah.
Echopolis, we'll go with. Because I know we both tried that at launch. We played that for a little bit. I think it lasted a little longer for me than you.
Yeah.
But I wanted to hear your thoughts first on this, and then I'll kind of dive in.
Um, I'll be honest, what I remember most from it was how predatory the game felt because you needed so many copies of a character, but they didn't, the pull economy was not set up, or at least to me, it didn't feel like it was set up at the time for you to actually pull multiple copies of characters. Um, I feel if you're going to build your entire game around, you need 6 copies, 12 copies, however many copies of the character in order to make them like viable. You need to be way more generous. Like that's just the baseline of what you got to do. Genshin plays it where if you get a single copy or a single duplicate or third duplicate of a character, you'll get a significant power bump, but the character is functionally playable at Constellation Zero, E0, what have you. And that's really where you're kind of supposed to evaluate their kits at. I did not feel that that was the case in Echo Apocalypse, and that just did not sit well with me. I know that one of the things that you've also mentioned that I don't think I actually got far enough to really run into was that with all the different modes, you also kind of had to level everybody up for everything. There wasn't I guess you could level that criticism against Honkai Star Rail right now, where it's like, oh, well, end game is pure fiction, it's MOC, it's Apocalyptic Shadow. They've added all these different in-game modes that require vastly different character sets, but to Honkai's, sort of to give Honkai credit, they rolled those out slowly. They weren't dropped all on they weren't dropped on you day one, day two.
Hmm.
So you had time to build teams. You had time to kind of move stuff around, and a lot of what I feel like Apocalyptic Shadow and Pure Fiction were responses to problems with erudition characters, and they were responses to the way the meta was moving. They weren't trying to force you to play everything all the time, always. The same way that Echopocalypse, at least what I saw and what I heard, seemed to be trying. But those are my thoughts. What about you?
Yeah, so I want to give it credit where credit's due, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, and that was the roster of characters. You didn't have to level up every character. When you got them, it was the slot, right? It was
Correct.
you were leveling up the party slot, and you were leveling up the gear for the party slot, not the specific party. And so because of that, gear growth and everything was all pretty general and straightforward. Um, the the art, looks characters look good. Again, in the profile screen, they did go the more the full on chibi route in terms of the actual combat itself, but the skill cutscenes, character profile stuff, everything like that. And then if you did opt for spending real money, the costumes looked good as well. Now, as far as overall, again, to kind of give it some critiques or criticisms, to your point, the character hiding skills behind, duplicates is generally frowned upon, unless you have a very generous pull economy, and you just do not have that in this game. This game is not generous in terms of how many pulls you get for how many copies of a character you need in order to fully unlock the skills. And then the other big thing for this game too is I would describe it as either trying to do too much, and what I mean by that is it was a red dot simulator. There were red dots everywhere, and it was every day was trying to make all the red dots go away that you possibly could. And there were so many different game modes, like you mentioned, all dropped day one or shortly thereafter. And it's like you have a world boss, you have a tower mode, you have the story mode, you have an exploration mode, you have the arena, you have a different type of arena, you have guild stuff, you have like four, even within your own guild, there were like 4 things to do for the guild over the course of the day that you would want to check back on, is because things regenerated over time for a lot of this stuff. It wasn't like I have 3 uses in a given day for a lot of this stuff. Maybe some of the guild stuff, maybe you had like 5 attempts a day, but again, it's trying to do too much and cover too many different genres in terms of the game mode itself which is effectively an AFK auto battler.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of other like less well done cash grabs that are these type of games that are maybe just reskinned games. I'm blanking on names, but I think of like games like Attack on Time. Or there was I think a Doki Doki game, not Doki Doki Literature Club, not that one, but like there was a Gacha Doki Doki something, which literally took the same assets from a different game that maybe the studio did and reskinned it and was, got all the pop-ups. It's like one of those types of game. Now Echopocalypse didn't have pop-ups like some of those other games have. What I'm speaking to is, again, just you got like 60 different game modes and you have to play them all every day. It's like, man, this is a gacha game. Like, get me in and out in 10, 15 minutes tops, in a general setting, and then I can have the option to play longer if I want to, but not necessarily be required to, do dailies and stuff like that. So
yeah, as a rule of thumb, if I'm playing on the toilet, don't give me a hernia if I have to do everything. Okay?
Yeah, if my legs start to fall asleep, yeah, there's too much going on.
Yeah.
And I want to slide a 6th game in here that I actually just thought of too. That was kind of unique, which was the I just had let me check my notes here. The Angels on Stage. I'd be remiss if I didn't go with a game that was a pleasant surprise in terms of how ridiculously silly it was. But Angels on Stage was the cosplaying gacha game. I know I don't again I know I tried it out for a little bit and it was humorous and funny to me. Uh, Ultimately, not didn't stick with it, but I just the concept of it being that you are not battling per se, you are striking poses for photographers and fanboys, and you're raising their emotional points rather than draining an HP bar. And the characters are there's about like 5 or 6 characters, but they all just have different cosplay. Is the different versions of them. So um, that one was humorous and just kind of a pleasant surprise, right? We've talked about a couple that were really good, some that exceeded our expectations, some that fell short of that. This one was one that to me came out of nowhere and was a pleasant surprise. But shifting the topic, shifting the conversation, I do want to touch on a few games that we're saying goodbye to this year that we've said goodbye to. Uh, I have a couple here. I have two that I played, and one that I'm still technically playing, but is set to expire at the end of this year. And then Steve, if you had any that you had wanted to say goodbye to, I want to touch on those as well. But first, I want to talk very briefly about Brave 9, scheduled to end of service at the end of this year, December 31st. But this one's been a fun game. It's been around for 7 years. I started playing it close to its launch when it was on mobile. I dropped it for about a few years. Basically, when they introduced companions, the second wave of companions is when I dropped the game due to, I think, size on my cell phone and space, not any other reason. And then when I found they had the Steam client, I picked it back up, even though I had to start from scratch. I had to start from day one. I couldn't carry over my mobile account. But they made it real easy to catch back up, which was one of the reasons I'm still playing it. It's because it was so generous in that regards, but also in the fact that they are shutting down and they know they're shutting down, they become that same generous group again. And even in the game that they have ongoing with Brown Dust 2 being generous in terms of its pull economy, it's a similar thread. So I want to play games and by developers that I want to support in that regards. But yeah, they give out 200 plus pulls a day on various like the legendary and exalted banners, which are the higher end banners. They give out multiple like level ascension materials, skill books, like very generous right now. So if you are interested now, even if it's only for a month, it definitely scratches the itch of needing to pull or wanting to pull and get that dopamine hit, a 5 star or their equivalent of a 5 star unit. But that is that's my time with Brave 9. Steve, what about you? Have you have any reminiscent memories on that one?
It's one where in a lot of ways, I'm happy that Brown Dust 2 exists because I don't want Brave 9/Brown Dust to kind of go away. Like I would be sad if it disappeared completely. The fact that they're recycling a lot of the characters, a lot of the not quite the story. The story is definitely different, but the same characters and so on and so forth are appearing. Kind of warms the cockles of my heart. There are definitely a few characters that show up in Brown Dust 2 that I'm like, oh, I remember you. I liked you. You were fun. So in some ways, the unfortunate end of service of Brave 9 is not quite as saddening as it could be, because at least there's something that you get to kind of continue on and experience with Brown Dust 2. I am a little bit sad that the system has changed as much as it has, that from a combat point of view. You're much more limited on characters that you can put on field and so on and so forth. But the spirit of it survives. So yeah,
They've actually thinking about it. They've done a lot of different game types with the IP because there was a single player like story game that didn't last very long, and then they actually had a match 3 game. I think that also came out at the very beginning of this year. Maybe it was end of service at the beginning of this year and came out late 2023, which was like Magical Stones or something like that. I don't even think it had like the Brown Dust Brave 9 in the title. It was just whatever it was.
Yeah.
Magical Stones. And so yeah, I have a soft spot for the IP. I really like the art. I'm a big fan of Brown Dust too, and how generous they are, and just kind of the different strategy play style of the game. So Brave 9, calling it quits at the end of the year after more than 7 years of service give it the big '07 there. Um, the other game I wanted to mention was Alchemist Code. So this one, for those unfamiliar, was a Final Fantasy Tactics style game. I played this for a while back at launch because I love Final Fantasy Tactics. I love Fire Emblem Advance War type games, and this was scratching that itch that had been missing since Phantom of the Kill left global. Uh, and so I really enjoyed all the different characters, because there was a large roster in that game. It was definitely a game for me that, like, it wasn't one of those you could play on the toilet, as it were, to use your expressions from
Mhm.
earlier. Um, but it's a tactical game. They're designed to be more sit down and plays, and so I want to give a '07 to Alchemist Code as well on that one. Again, just because I love tactics games. I know that the game had some of its faults in terms of maybe some character growth systems and things implemented later on in the game. Uh, but for me, that style of game and that genre of tactical RPGs have some soft spots in my heart. So, is that one that you would ever try it out?
No, I unfortunately never touched it. So, F's in chat, but unfortunately, no emotional connection there.
Were there any games that you wanted to give a shout out to that have left us this year?
No, my car doesn't have a rear view mirror because I don't look to the past. I'm only focused forward.
All right, Mr. Philosophy. Well, I
Yeah.
guess, yeah, the windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. So
Yeah.
looking forward at games that have just launched, though small, quickly looking into the back. Last week, I had a short review for Starseed, Asnia Trigger, and Haze Reverb. And looking forward here, you've tried those out. So I want to hear your reviews on both of those games, whichever one you'd like to speak to first. Let's hear what you got. What you think?
Sure. So I'll start with Haze Reverb. So just spoilers. I know that when you did your review, you mentioned that one of them wasn't on your phone anymore. For me, both of them are still on the phone.
Okay.
Um, but I do agree with you that if when I cut, Haze is probably going to be the first to go. Um, the I'm going to be honest. Haze is one of those that I find frustrating and bizarrely endearing because it knows what it is, but it seems to want to throw obstacles in your way of like getting to the game. There was a point playing the game where I hadn't even fully unlocked everything, and I was not able to proceed, like beat anything. Like I was locked out content wise, and I was sitting there going like, I think I'm gonna have to drop it because I can't believe this, but I haven't even finished the tutorial. Like I'm in world like 1 or 2, and I can't proceed. Like I'm just getting bodied by bosses and so forth. And this is during the launch window when they're at their most generous. How am I struggling this much? And it turns out part of the problem was that they had upped the size of your team without telling me. So I was still running with like a 5 unit team when I was supposed to be having like 7 or 9 characters on field. So once I figured that out, that helped. But yeah, it wants to be Brown Dust or Brown Dust 2, but it just doesn't quite hit that. I will admit also the character designs are a little bit more racy than I would prefer. You know, not necessarily like I'm not offended by it or anything. It's just meh, just a little bit too a type of risque that I just don't enjoy, I guess. Um, so I'm sticking with it for a little bit, but I suspect that by the weekend, if it doesn't improve for me, I'm probably going to cut it. But jumping over to Starseed, that one I did enjoy more. Um, I guess the long and the short of it is what annoys me about it is you have to get multiple copies of characters in order to unlock gear slots for characters. So you can't even equip everything until you hit, I think, UR or UR1.
Yeah, something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
something like that. So it really heavily pushes you to get dupes, to do lots of rolls and so forth. But what I will say is that they do give you the materials to do that, at least so far. That I haven't hit a point to where I'm sitting there going like, okay, there's just nothing for me to do. Every day that I log in, there is something that lets me, get ahead. It is an auto battler and a idle game, which means by default, you kind of the sooner you start it, the more powerful you will be. Which is kind of one of the downsides, I would say, of those style games. It ends up snowballing. But again, I'll probably keep playing it at least for a little bit. Whether it's still here by Christmas, I don't know. Out of the two, I definitely preferred Starseed. And surprise, surprise, I basically agreed with most of your criticism and thoughts on those games. So if you haven't seen last week's episode, I would suggest giving it a listen because I agree with basically everything you said.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I find your critique of Haze Reverbs to be more risque than you. Like I don't remember it being all that risque, but maybe that's just I'm numb and immune to that. Perhaps I don't know. But
Yeah, there's some character models in there that I don't know. Anyways, but continue.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to go back and look at that for research purposes. No, my mention on Haze Reverb, like I said, is because it is a Brown Dust clone in terms of combat, just mecha names instead of high fantasy. I'll wait for that to have their PC launch if they do it through Steam or something like that. But yeah, I'm still playing Starseed as Nia Traeger, still leveling up and stuff there. Enjoying that. I didn't mention it last week, but something I'm a sucker for, being a numbers guy. I love that there's a DPS chart.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you can cycle through damage done, healing done, and show like what characters are doing how much. I am a huge sucker for that, especially because it helps me understand and see what characters are my weak links and who synergizes with whom a little better. So while I have been playing Eversoul longer, and Starseed is basically a clone of Eversoul, it's just again futuristic, realistic technology as opposed to high fantasy magic and stuff like that. They have a damage chart, and I appreciate that a lot. So as far as the year in review with games go, I think that kind of touches on everything I had, unless if there was anything else or honorable mentions that you had or anything I
Well,
maybe skipped over.
I guess I'm going to tag one last thing here on at
Yeah,
the end.
do we?
We talked about a lot of other games that we have played, but let's go back to our bread and butter real quick. Um, what? How do you feel about the year in review for Genshin, for Honkai, for Nikkei? Nikkei is an honorable bread and butter here. I mean, we both play it fairly regularly. So, for those three games, sort of how do you feel the year has been for those?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with talking about the honorable mention Nikkei, because this kind of touches on some other news that I was gonna have. But overall, I enjoyed Nikkei. I think I love the story and where it's interested to see where it's going. Um, they're in the middle of their second anniversary right now, and they always do their anniversary events really well, and this one's no exception. They've introduced two new playable characters that have been introduced into the story for since like a while back, but now we actually get them as playable characters, and uh, both are awesome and really cool aesthetics for in their own distinct, unique, different ways. Um, and then as far as the game, I think they do a really good job listening to player feedback. Where I would probably say Nikkei falls short, or earns a little bit of criticism, and this is kind of what I was going to get into in our other news stuff, would be with their last collaboration with Evangelion. So we were reading reports that per Shift Up, the developer
Mm-hmm.
for Nikkei, that it did not do as well as they were hoping it would do. And while this didn't surprise me, um, it was something worth noting. And the reason it didn't really surprise me was a couple reasons. One, I don't know if Evangelion resonates with the player base. It may fit in the the genre world, right, with kind of the mecha
Hmm.
and futuristic society stuff like that. But I think that anime, A, being a little bit older, the younger generation may not have watched that and may not have been on the to-do list, right? Because it is older, so they aren't familiar with the source material. But then the idea of Nikkei and the fan service that it provides, a lot of the Evangelion characters' outfits, costumes were very much on the more conservative side, in line with what the anime portrays it. Because it's not like it's an ecchi anime or even something that's remotely fan service in terms of the most obvious term of fan service.
Yeah.
Sure, there's fan service within it. It's you all know what I mean. And so I think because there's that disconnect, not only with not maybe the audience being familiar with the IP, but also in terms of what we've seen character design wise in Nikkei, it didn't necessarily fit. So I think that moving forward with collaborations, I think they'll probably do a better job of taking maybe some of that into consideration in terms of how much leeway do we have with the IP to put the Nikkei jiggly butt,
Hmm.
spin on it as it were for what will really pop in a rail shooter, right? So they're going to take that into account, I'm sure, moving forward. Um, and then also IPs that maybe are more familiar with today's player base than something because didn't Evangelion wasn't that originally late 90s?
Okay, look,
Maybe
you're making me feel old because the fact that you were saying like Evangelion is something that like modern Gacha
I
players
look
wouldn't be aware of
I
is
I,
it's blowing my
I say
mind. You're not wrong, but it would be like saying Cowboy Bebop is something that like anime
yes,
watchers wouldn't
and
be
Cowboy
aware of.
Bebop is my favorite anime, but
I know. It's
we
like
have to be honest with these
I know,
things. We
I
have to
know.
be honest with these things.
Oh,
Again, you and I, we are two individuals. We grew up with co-op couch gaming. That
yeah.
is not something that maybe today's generation has, right? We're just two older dude gamers trying to keep up in this crazy gotcha gamer mobile world, and
I,
giving maybe a more nuanced
again,
discussion take on it.
yeah, not saying that you're wrong, just that it blows my mind. It's one of those where it's just like, oh, what do you mean? It's a classic.
Correct.
It's
It's a
one that
classic.
you would watch. Like, what do you mean? You can't call yourself an anime fan if you haven't watched Evangelion. It'd be like not watching Ghost in the Shell and calling yourself an fan. What even
So
are you?
But yeah,
Um,
so I think that they're gonna learn from that and move forward in a better way. Another criticism or critique I would give them is they've never done a rerun for skins. So like if you missed a battle pass skin, there's not been another way to obtain it. And then also along those same lines, the costume gotcha is wild to me. Like the skins, obviously there's more effort put into it with their own voice lines, their own custom cutscene, skill cutscene. So I understand that. But when you have a battle pass skin that's like $20, and then you have these gotcha skins, which yes, technically you can get them on as early as the fifth pull in a gotcha. Realistically, you're spending $60.
mhm.
Like realistically, you're spending $60 to get that gotcha skin. And yes, counterpoints have been, oh well, there's growth materials and pulls that you'll get along the way. Okay, but $60 is a lot
Yeah.
for a gotcha skin. Like it's just a lot. I think they would be better served, even if it's something as silly or stupid as making skin available from the first pull on.
Hmm.
It's a move in the right direction. It's showing at least a little bit of like, hey, we understand somebody's going to get this on their first pull and we're going to lose out. But what are the odds of that person actually spending the $60 to go try and get it, right? And it'll just at least the aesthetic or the optics of it will make the community feel better about things. But again, overall, and I know I've been rambling for a while because I'm very passionate about this game. Overall, like I said, I think they're doing a great job. I love their live streams that they do and the developer interviews and stuff. It seems like a really fun group to work for and be with.
I'm going to be much shorter when talking about Nikkei. Just gonna
Yeah,
slip in
sorry.
here. You're good. You're
No,
good.
you can get to our bread and butter and dive in
Yeah.
there.
So as far as Nikkei goes, I tend to dip in and out of it. I'm back in for the anniversary. I'll probably dip out afterwards because they'll be less generous, so on and so forth. But overall, I'm pretty pleased. The fact that I can consistently come back to Nikkei, I think, is a testament to its quality. Um, but I'll leave it at that. Moving on, let's go to Genshin. Just again, real quick. I think as of recording, we're 2/3 of the way through the Natlin storyline. I think Natlin has been a overall, you know, solid addition to the Genshin world map. I I am still frustrated with the fact that pretty much as soon as Chinese New Year ends, there's not a reason to log into Genshin. Um, at least for me, the events tend to still be the same old, same old. I'm really hoping that they do something to shake it up in the next year. I will still be on the ride of, Genshin, but I'm hitting a point. I'm hitting an inflection point of, I would like to see something. Because I feel like, I guess to jump over to Honkai Star Rail, Honkai is really hitting it out of the park for me, and Genshin is just kind of staying sliced bread. But those are my thoughts. Again, back over to you, Dave.
Yeah, so I will try and keep it short as well because I know I just rambled and Wayne waxed poetically about Nikkei. So for Genshin for me, I mean I'm still enjoying the game. I'm not letting these off banner pulls get to me too much. But I have like you said, Natlan I think has been pretty good. Really been kind of enjoying the story and the characters they're introducing to us. Music, of course, is always well done and fantastic. Um, my my deal with Genshin right now is that every day I am constantly trying to push a quest forward, whether it be a character quest, a hangout, a world quest, or the main quests when those are applicable. I always try and push those a little bit forward a day because that way it doesn't seem so overwhelming. And so in doing that, I think I actually finally finished a lot of Sumeru quests that came out, effectively 2 years
Yeah.
ago. But again, just overall really enjoying it. I'm excited to see where the story goes, and so that's where Genshin is for me on that. The big thing with Genshin that I would like to see implemented, we talked about this in a previous episode about changes we would make, is I have about 70 or 80 of the condensed resin just saved up in my inventory that I would really just like to be able to say, let me run a dungeon, a domain, like one time and have that count for like times 5 drops, times whatever drops. More than making me craft the refined resin to with a crystal fly material to get a 2 for run. Let us do more. Let us not take all of those mats. Just let us do it, please.
Yeah.
As opposed to Star Rail where I have like 10 of the refined fuel and I'm actually in the middle of using that because of some recent polls. Go check out my Acheron polls and see how quickly I throw off the Mr. Off banner name, or do I?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then shifting over to Star Rail, Star Rail it's really just kind of been great. It's hitting a lot of check boxes for me. You know, some recent characters that we've pulled for every me to play the game and really push a lot of the end game content. So like the Jade banner, having fun building a team around Jade and a follow up team, which is what Pure Fiction is, has been a lot of fun. And while some of the events maybe have been a little bit tedious or amiss, overall I see the effort going into these stories, and I appreciate the amount of time they give us because it's not a 2 week in FOMO. It's a 6 week get these limited event rewards, and if you don't do it even in those 6 weeks, we'll still let you access it. We'll just take away some of those initial limited rewards. So they're doing it the right way. I wish more would take note of what Star Rail is doing and kind of adopt some of those quality lives, and I think it would put a lot of good faith and good optics in those gaming communities if they were to maybe take some of those steps. Even Genshin could take a page from some of the things Star Rail's doing, like you mentioned. But that, I kind of went on long there. I'm sorry. I got all these opinions.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. We got nothing but time.
Well, I do very quickly. I know we've talked about the Gacha games, I want to touch on. I don't want to take too much time, and I mean it for myself more than you, but I'm really going to stick to this. In terms of the growth of in our channel, we've been doing this for a year now, and we appreciate everybody that's helped support and sent suggestions and questions in, and have emailed us or joined over in Discord, and are listening every week. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, we'd be talking about this, and just the fact that we have other folks listening has been great. But if views weren't a thing, if long form podcasts weren't, the thing that people listen to the most, what type of videos would you prefer to be doing? Because like we do this, obviously we have our off banner, non gotcha discussions. We have poll videos. We've done let's play styles. But Steve, what's been your most favorite content to create?
I actually think the main podcast is my favorite, primarily because since I have to do the editing as well, I have the podcast editing down kind of pat. It's a process that I kind of done. I'm good with. Where whenever we kind of go off script or we try out other stuff, I have to try to figure it out as we go, which is why I don't necessarily 100% stand by all of the editing that I've done for the Let's Plays or when both of us were playing and so on and so forth. I fully admit that those are not necessarily up to professional quality. Not that I would necessarily say that even our podcast at the moment is up to professional quality. Limitations there, but I do enjoy doing the podcast. I think one thing I am interested in maybe potentially doing is more like single content of just you or just me playing through games, etc., etc. I think that would be something that I would enjoy. Again, those are also typically a little bit easier to edit, since it's all one continuous take and don't have to do too much cutting and splicing and fixing. But yeah, I enjoy the podcast. I enjoy doing that, and I'm super thankful for everyone who's been listening up till now. But what about you?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned all that. So I think I'm a little bit similar. I do enjoy talking about games and the direction of games and speculation and everything like that, similar to you, right? It's why we're doing it.
Yeah.
And then also like you, I think I really enjoyed doing the Hellblade playthrough and putting that out there for you guys to watch. And I think, yeah, maybe potentially more of that if you guys enjoy that. Or for me, I know you and I talked about it off stream. I'm not opposed to even putting on a set times maybe during the evening and streaming, and actually having live interactions with folks, because that I think would be the next. That would be the whole next level for me, is like to go in a streaming format and interacting with our audience in a live capacity during maybe story-driven games, or maybe teamfight tactics or something like that. Could be a lot of fun just to have that live, real-time responses. But I think that's going to do it for this discussion. I do want to get into, we have, I know we talked about my Nikkei news and the Shift Up talking about the Evangelion collab, but we do have some other news as well that I want to touch on. And then we also, of course, have an event going on in Honkai Star Rail. So, Steve, I think I'm going to throw it over to you for that.
All right. So the only Hoyoverse events going on at the moment are in Honkai Star Rail, the Shadow of the Ranger. It's an assignment event where you assign characters and you get primogems and materials and so on and so forth. It's been run before. If you've played Star Rail before or for a while, you should be familiar with this style of event. I believe it's going on for about a week or two. But yeah, pretty straightforward and simple event. Back over to you, Dave, for other game news.
Yeah, so in other Gacha news, we already talked about the Nikkei Evangelion collab that Shift Up talked about. But the other news with Nikkei is they are partnering, I believe, with Netflix to do an anime adaptation. So I will be very intrigued to see how that's done when that is coming out in that timeline, because Gacha game anime adaptations are a mixed bag. I think because Princess Connect had one, Azure Lane had one, um, and there are a few others that are slipping that aren't on top of mind right now.
Arc
But
Knights, I know, had one.
I thought Arc Knights did, maybe
Yeah.
Blue Archive, but um, yeah. So I will be very interested to see what they do with this, and again, what the timeline is. Because if it's through something like Netflix or something as big as Netflix, uh, I expect production value.
Yeah.
I expect a quality product. So hopefully they don't let me down or butcher my baby. Um, Other mobile gaming news: Genshin, Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves have all been nominated for Mobile Game Update of the Year. So we'll see those award shows probably gonna pick up in, I would imagine, December, or are they here at the end of November? I don't remember which.
I think it's December,
Uh,
but
but something to keep an eye on there. And then we did have a couple of global launches for a few different games I wanted to mention. So Ash Echoes just launched this past week. It is a mix between strategy, tactical RPG, and real-time strategy. So that one's an interesting one that's out there. And then the other game that came out just, I think, today here, as we were able to record this on the 14th, was Heaven Burns Red, which came out there. It's the same studio that did Another Eden, but this game just came out as well. So if you liked Another Eden, or that studio, want to support them, give Heaven Burns Red a check. I believe it's looking like it's a turn-based JRPG type of anime, but a little bit maybe more story-driven. If you are familiar with Another Eden, I think traditional old school PlayStation RPG with a gacha element sprinkled in, right? But that's going to do it for my news and kind of other launches that happened. Steve, I do want to throw it to you because you are going to share our holiday schedule and what to expect content-wise from us over the next couple months.
all right, no problem. So I guess I'm going to start with an apology. Apparently, I am not as good at math as I thought I was. As our longtime listeners will know, we do 10 episode seasons and then we take 2 weeks off. So a total of 12 weeks. And for whatever reason, when we first developed this schedule, in my head, I went 12 weeks. That's 3 months. 3 times 4 is 12. That'll cover the entire year. Forgetting that there are 52 weeks in a year, not 48 weeks in a year. So we do have a bit of a lag between now and New Year. So I'm happy to announce that we are going to be doing what I am calling off-banner recordings, which will be Dave and I talking about other content, videos, video games maybe, shows, comics, what have you. In this same format, it will just be off-banner discussion. So for the next 4 weeks after we wrap this up, we will be doing off-banner episodes, and then we will be taking 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year's, and we will be back on the podcast itself, the Brohoyo podcast. Will be back on the 6th of January. So from the 25th through the 16th, we'll be releasing our 25th of November through the 16th of December of this year, 2024. We will be releasing the off-banner contents. We'll then have 2 weeks off. We'll go back to regular season, and ideally, starting next year, we'll be doing off-banner episodes during our breaks instead of just having a full 2 weeks off. But yeah, that's that. I just wanted to let everybody know kind of what's going on and why you might not be hearing us talking about Gacha until the new year.
So we can expect, off banner discussions same time as the normal podcast is released on those Monday afternoons at 1 Eastern, noon Central. And then for December 23rd and December 30th, there won't be any scheduled releases on those particular Mondays. And then Monday the 6th, you'll be back for our 5th season of the podcast. If I'm understanding that correctly.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
That is an accurate summary of what I was trying to convey.
Excellent. I just want to make sure I understood. I was pretty sure I did, but just to make it even more simpler for anybody else that needed it done for them too. No shame in that. But we do want to thank you guys for joining us this week. Let us know, hey, what are your Gacha highlights for the year? What have you experienced that's, you've been wanting to celebrate, or maybe something that fell short of your expectations, some lowlights maybe of the year. Maybe it was in Gacha pulls. Maybe you're like me and you're Mr. Off Banner. I don't know. Let us know. But if you did enjoy this episode and you'd like to show your support for the show, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Of course, you can always email us at brohoyopod@gmail.com if you have any questions or suggestions for the show. We also have the link to our Discord down in the description, so you can join us over there for news, game nights, and content notifications. Especially while we're off during the holidays here, we'll still be checking the Discord if you guys have anything over there. And you can also check out our channel, like we mentioned, over the next few weeks for the continuation of our off-banner review series. But enjoy your holidays, and the podcast will again be back in 2025. Until then, keep gaming.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate.